Welcome to the Overcoming Student Barriers webinar for the Idaho Learning Partnership project. Just today, talk through those ideas, those concerns, those barriers that adult students might have going back to school or starting school, recognizing that they have a lot going on in life and may not feel like their opportunity to go back to school is realistic. What those barriers are, and then address them. Talk about what the resources are that are available to support students in so many areas. And those arenas include a few criteria, a few buckets, and we'll talk about those, including the academic support systems and the non-academic support systems that are available for students when they look at potentially going back to school for whatever reason and think about what might be the barriers for them to do that. So time is obviously a big one, right? I don't have enough time because I'm fill in the blank. I'm a parent. I'm caring for an aging parent. I'm working full time. I'm already taxed as it is, et cetera. Another bucket of barriers is finances. You know, there's an expense to go back to school to pay for tuition, and I don't have enough money as it is to cover bills, or I'm really tight right now. How would I do that if I'm working, et cetera? Another bucket is an idea just labeled preparation. That is, if I haven't been a student for a long time and I'm out of practice, what does that mean for me to re-enter into that kind of phase of life, being out of practice of being in the quote unquote the classroom, studying, reading, writing, working in groups with people on projects, et cetera. Another bucket of barriers, potentially support. College is for 18-year-olds to 22-year-olds only, and I'm out of that age bracket, and the schools, the students, the teachers, they won't be able to support me in that work. So you've had a few minutes to think about your what you've heard in your community related to these or other ideas around barriers and why students may or may not want to go back or try to go to school as an adult learner. So I'd ask the three of you, open up your mic if you would, and share with us what you've heard from your specific community. So those are some general ideas that I just shared about potential barriers. What are the barriers that you've heard specifically in your communities?
I think for us, for Glenns Ferry, it would probably be time and financial, possibly more than the other ones. Just they are working lots of time, or single parents and juggling kids and all that, or the money. There's just not enough money to be able to prioritize going back to school for that.
Yeah, that makes sense, Jen. And Kathy?
I think a piece that I heard in visiting with somebody was kind of some lack of motivation to even want to get moving and making any improvements with their educational learning. Just some apathy, and I don't understand why that is.
Sure. And how, if I can ask Kathy, you've heard that through, a handful of people, or is that how pervasive might that be, that sense of apathy?
Just in passing, I encountered a gal that I was selling what was it? It was a small printer that my mom was getting rid of, and I had some conversation. I said, so what are your plans with it, to help your daughter with her schoolwork or things like that? She says, no, I've been thinking about going back to school in accounting, and I, kind of relayed to her, I've been an accountant for 35 years and where it kind of took me and things like that. And I wished her luck on it. And she says, yeah, well, this, that, and everything else. And she kind of had in her mind, yeah, she wanted to do it, but she was lacking motivation to really give her the prod to get her push forward to following through.
Thanks for sharing that, Kathy. Jamie, what's happening in, is it Osborne, and what you might hear in your community?
Yes, it is Osborne. I think that the time, the finances, and then the single parent issue, or a situation where maybe they have 4 or 5 children and they're wondering about childcare and thinking about, okay, well, I'll have to spend this time being able to study, and what am I going to do with my children when I'm trying to concentrate? Those kinds of things.
Thanks. No, that's a practical issue as the parents have to deal with their students and their children as students, and working schooling from home as many are in some communities. All right, so let's talk through those categories, and as you have comments or suggestions of solutions, please unmute and speak up. So you travel, leaving where I live to go to a school is often a barrier, a perceived barrier, and in reality, even before this academic year, before this calendar year, universities, schools were moving to an online model, at least as a hybrid, where some classes are online and some are local. And so students could take a lot of online classes. Even more so now, in the last handful of months, universities have had to pivot so that the barrier of leaving town permanently for the school year or temporarily to commute to a classroom, those barriers have been reduced for sure. And to be frank, schools are still working out what that means as they're adjusting to more online learning. And in scheduling, how does a student work full time and go to school? And it is possible, and you've heard that from your community members, right? Of there's too much to do, and how do I arrange time for my kids to be covered? Does it mean that I am doing my online schooling between the hours of 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. every day when kids are hopefully in bed? And in addition to that kind of flexibility, the schools have support systems to support students who are working, recognizing, and faculty, staff know that most students are working in some at least part-time capacity, and some are honestly working full-time, especially the older students. And so there's an awareness of that from the university writ large, as well as faculty and staff. I'm not saying it's easy to do that. There's a stat here that those facing kind of economical disadvantages are less likely to go on to school or to enroll in school after high school and as adults. And so there's a sense that potential students who fall in that category are underrepresented in higher education. There's the sense that it's a big deal, right, to pay for school because of tuition, and there's perception. And also, in addition to that perception doesn't take into account all the available options of financial aid so that it is affordable. It can be affordable. And there's a lack of awareness, and through no fault of the student or the student's potential student or student's spouse or caregiver or whomever. And sometimes the systems to access those financial resources can be convoluted and to navigate, filling out forms, submitting documentation, et cetera, or even knowing what one person is qualified to get in terms of financial aid. Another element to that is the idea of making money to then support a family rather than going on like right after high school anyway, is more precise on that one, that the schooling doesn't pencil out in the long run. We talked about this a little bit during our last webinar about the affordability of school, paying for school, and then the long-term kind of income generation that comes from having a degree. Still on the financial side, most students honestly don't pay full price. There's some form of financial aid in the form of loans, which do need to be repaid, but many grants and scholarships for students in different categories where there's free money. It does take the energy of requesting, filling out forms, maybe having a follow-up, et cetera. So it's not free in the sense of no effort put out, but it's available. Yeah, Jen.
Hey, so I've heard some some people that aren't necessarily considered like low income on taxes or things like that, but they don't they like make too much to qualify for some stuff, but they, you know, don't make enough that they would have like that little bit left over to afford schooling or stuff like that. Are there resources available kind of for different income levels that can hit that middle group that maybe isn't qualified technically as low income, but just doesn't mean there's a bunch left over to help them through school?
There's a program through the state called the Opportunity Scholarships for adult learners, and I'll share a link later that addresses that need, where it does take into consideration income level. And I've heard in conversations that I've been in the last handful of months, Jen, about that issue of don't earn, you know, I earn too much to qualify for certain things. So the state is trying to lower that that amount so that more students are qualified for those the adult opportunity scholarships. That's a real thing that you're hearing, because I've heard it too from school counselors and school admissions officers, and so they're trying to address that by changing the criteria so that more students are in the eligible category for that. And because navigating the financial side is pretty complicated, and the accountant among us will attest to that, right? Schools have professionally trained folks to help. And those assistants, those reps, those counselors are willing to work with students. Again, even if a student isn't enrolled in that school, but is interested in potentially enrolling in that school, then talking with a financial aid counselor early on is a great way to go, because that counselor knows how to navigate through the system, what's available, how to apply, and timing of all the financial assistance. And again, at the kind of the end of our conversation, I'll share some links to at least Boise State University, in the financial aid office, and, you know, phone number and email address to contact. And I think for an adult learner who's got those questions, the expert will be able to answer those questions readily. And our job as librarians is to provide that entree, make that introduction. Here's the phone number. Here's the link where you can go and have that conversation with the financial aid counselor, because it is a big deal. So talking kind of the next category of, you know, fitting in. If I'm an adult learner and I'm 33 or 42 or even older, and I'm in class with a bunch of 20-year-olds, isn't that going to, you know, make me feel awkward? And the stats show that there are older students. This is the circle charts, age 25 to 64. The red bar on each of the circles is the representation of that age group. There's a typo. It's Lewis Clark State College, not Lewis and Clark. And, you know, College of Eastern Idaho has a big percentage, and Western Idaho does too. And the lowest one there, obviously, is University of Idaho, the traditionally kind of, you know, residential school in the state. So it bears out that older adult learners won't be in the classroom with a bunch of 20 and younger year olds. And this mental model, this stereotype of the quote unquote typical student really doesn't hold as well. Students are coming in with all kinds of backgrounds. Maybe they've been in the military for you know, 10, 15 years and are going back to school, and they've had that experience where other students didn't, or, you know, maybe even getting a second degree, or upskilling and want to get a degree to shift careers. So all those backgrounds, those lifestyles, the demographic people are in, the institutions know that and have the support on staff to work with those students, that there are opportunities for connecting with other like students, you know, peer groups, whether that's in person or remote. The challenges of balancing work, childcare, caring for an aging parent. The institutions know all about those challenges for students, and so have supports to work with students to maybe coach them or train them or have a teaching session, et cetera, to help with those needs. So they won't be alone, is the summary. And even on the intake side, when students come to a school to potentially apply, the institutions know all about the various kinds of students that are applying, that are in the school, and can even from day one start talking about those support systems initially, so that they're buttressed at the very beginning of the program, and not, you know, a few months in feeling swamped, can start them off on a strong footing with those support systems. It does take some level of effort. So Kathy, I appreciate you bringing up the kind of the apathy emotion, because it is work to be a student. There's no doubt about that. And does require that kind of motivation to go through. But knowing that their support systems might improve that motivation. So we've talked about the, you know, caring for kids, or been out of school for a while, or in the military, or spouse of a military person. The institutions, again, are working with folks who are balancing all these responsibilities. Gone is the day of the stereotypical 100% focused on school student. It's morphed quite a bit. So this is kind of a ladder of engagement for potential students returning to school, or starting school later in life for the first time. Y'all, the higher education connectors among us, that kind of entry point as they come into the library, or you meet them in your community, and identify resources, the next steps where they can go to get information, get some questions answered, identify a counselor at a school for those questions to be addressed to. There's, you know, these success coaches in the admissions side. You know, it's kind of step one, right, of what does it take to apply, what programs are available, what are the kind of the outputs and expectations on a student in given disciplines within an institution. So talking about that kind of entry level admissions, and those counselors can work with potential students from day one. And then a financial aid counselor, another level of support, talking through the options for financing and paying for the schooling, recognizing that it's a significant potential barrier. Helping a student identify where they might apply for a grant or a scholarship of one kind or another. And then as a student in the school, what's the support doing the academics? The, you know, coaches, tutors, peer tutors, you know, note-taking service to help students, and academic advisors is going to help select coursework and plot out, you know, a 5-year, 6-year plan for each student. And then more peer advisor, peer groups, where there are other students who've gone through already, want to support those students and aid them as they step into their journey together. So a lot of these supports, and again, the kind of the summary is that, you know, each student, they're not alone. There's a lot of supports at the school. They recognize that they want to see the students start and finish. And in order to finish, each of those students needs a different level of support to make it through to completion. In addition to the kind of more academic side, there's support for students who may be food insecure, additional financial assistance that comes up unexpectedly, and even the fourth bullet, you know, legal assistance and other kind of related services for students provided at low to no cost. When I was an undergraduate student, went on a road trip with a friend, and he was from the same school. We rolled the car I wasn't behind the wheel, we rolled the car on a snowy road in New Mexico, and so he needed some legal assistance on how to help get the car covered, insurance, et cetera, but he had already graduated. So because I was in the car, I talked to a legal advisor through the school and had a, you know, really cut rate in terms of getting some legal assistance. So it's things like that where schools are providing these resources beyond the academics for students to be well-grounded and holistic. Maybe I'll pause there real briefly and just talk about other things that have come to mind in the last handful of minutes as we've gone through those examples. Jen, like what you raised about, you know, kind of income level. Yeah, Kathy.
Something kind of came to mind. I think a lot of our focus has been on, you know, the academics of, you know, somebody doing coursework to become, you know, a teacher or, you know, an accountant, medical profession. What about things like in the trades, to become a welder, to become a mechanic, an electrician, things like that? We're looking at a different set of obstacles. A lot of that needs to be in person, hands-on training of attending one of the colleges that offer applied tech programs.
No, that's right on.
Help support them and help focus them.
Yeah, again, the kind of the stereotype is you're on campus, you're going to those training episodes because they're nearby, they're in your town, or a short drive. When it becomes a 2-hour drive plus, is that realistic? One way that some localities are trying to address that, Kathy, is through virtual training, where the student can actually get kind of a augmented reality or virtual reality training from a computer, through a headset, et cetera, to learn about auto mechanics by virtually working on an engine, for instance, through some electronic tools like that. Perhaps not ideal, but under the circumstances, that reduces the travel barrier. It may not be in person, obviously. Another way is trying to be creative with, maybe there's a local apprenticeship that can do the same work for that student who wants to learn, but it's not at a formal institution per se. Someone isn't nearby here in the Treasure Valley, they can go to College of Western Idaho and do the training in a mechanic's auto shop, but maybe the mechanic where they happen to live has been trained and certified and qualified to have an apprenticeship, so that learning can take place in that auto shop in that person's hometown. So it's working through those kind of systems. And also with the Idaho Learning Partnership, there's a recognition that the Idaho Learning Partnership is focused on higher education, the colleges and the universities, and that the tech training is a related aspect that needs that conversation to happen as well. A good question. Other challenges that come to mind that we haven't already hit on, of why a student would say, no, not for me, can't do it, won't do it.
I just had a conversation with someone but maybe a month ago, and they were looking at, they wanted to go into veterinary care type deal, and what was a problem for them was the only course in Idaho is done out at Twin Falls at the College of Southern Idaho. And they said, I have no ability to drive that far to go to classes. And what was interesting, just on and Randy, what you said just brought that to mind, is I suggested that they go down and talk to a couple vet clinics here in town and see what some of the options were. And what was really interesting, and it kind of excited them, and I'll need to follow up and see how they're doing with this, is because the vet clinic said Idaho doesn't have licensing requirements for vet techs, and they would be willing to let her work in their clinic for a period of time and to see if she even likes doing that, and expose her to that that aspect of veterinary care. And because she would be doing a whole lot of things, and they said that we could start you off in this area and you would graduate and we would give you exposure to that, and then you could really make a decision on, do you want to go for the actual educational aspect of that? But so she was very, very pleasantly surprised that what she thought was an insurmountable barrier about getting experience and exposure was not that big of a deal. She could do it right here in town and do that for a year or so, and then possibly then go on to school if that was something that she wanted to pursue.
Thanks, Roger. Helpful to hear that. We're gonna, go ahead, Jen.
Well, one that just comes to mind for us being a small town is, and I know we can't solve the world's problems, but just the availability of those jobs. Like I know there are jobs available in Glennsbury, but I don't know how many jobs there could be potentially within our community if somebody gets a degree or gets some training in any of these areas. that means they'd have to leave the community to find a job that would help them. And many of the jobs in town, perhaps, a degree is not going to help them, and they don't want to leave the community. So that might be a barrier also, is just those availability of jobs once a degree or training is done.
That's right on. That makes total sense of, you know, the level of effort put into a degree, training, et cetera, and what are you going to get on the other side. Yep. And I think that, you know, in this project, in this program, understanding that each student is an individual student with different goals and objectives, and there isn't a clear one size fits all for every student, must get a bachelor's degree, et cetera, that they're customized to the needs of each student, for sure. Well, we're gonna go through a scenario of a kind of a, you know, a made up person and talk through some of those challenges kind of more in a kind of practical way. So as we go through that, think about how you would address the concerns, and we'll talk through some resources that are available for this kind of hypothetical potential student in this scenario. So Francine, 33, 3 daughters in K through 6, had a few jobs and full-time mom, volunteer work as well, has a few courses through extension post-high school, and then took some time off for the past decade or so, has interest in science and maybe a science teacher or working in a doctor's office, no nearby school, community college or university. So is recognizing that an online option might be what's for her. Some goals and motivations, example for her children as they get older, additional income perhaps, some motivation to address what we talked about earlier, and then the anticipation of that work and effort put into schooling to open up other career opportunities. Her perceived barriers are time, as we talked about on her schedule. Also the money that would go to pay for tuition would then be taken away from the rest of her family as she thinks about it, and being potentially academically unprepared given the time lag since being in the classroom, and as well as the modality of doing coursework online, which quite frankly is not for every student. So that's a realistic concern. She does have a computer at home, so that would support that work. You know, a husband who's working and has income, so there's some level of support there. And then just like the next step, where do I go? How do I get help to even address these issues and these concerns? That's where the connectors come into place, right? So some of the resources for her, if there's an individual that comes to your library and presents this way, this kind of scenario, remind them you don't have to go full-time. There are many part-time options out there. Yes, it would require, you know, 15, 20, maybe more hours per week, and that's an investment of time for sure, even if it's not a full-time course load. And flexibility in terms of the timing of when those are, where they're not at a set time all day, every day, but can be done on the student's own time in many cases. So finding that mix of being parents, being a student, et cetera. So financial opportunities, and again, in this slide deck again will be shared out probably later today on the web page. This opportunity scholarship that we talked about a little bit before, you know, $3,500 per year. To some, that may sound like a lot. Others like, no, that's not enough to get me through, you know, 4 years of schooling at a part-time scale. But it is something. And I've heard from those who manage this scholarship that they're underutilized, that there are more funds out there for students each year. Other scholarships too, you know, for all types of students. Again, we talked about the different like economic levels or career objectives or location in the state where you live, other criteria like that to help out students in different capacities. So that's addressing Francine's concern about finances as well as grants. Again, these are not loans, they're grants, so money to help support school. again, some maybe field-specific ones targeted towards, STEM or health, where there's a big need for future workers. Even private sector grants. The Idaho Community Foundation is one organization that supports students with grants, and others do around the state. So about the kind of the competence and where do I begin? These links that we explored last time we met, next steps and the future finder, and that third bullet is part of the Next Steps Idaho as well. Just for potential students to get a feel for what's out there in terms of career, what's out there in terms of degree programs, and what those degree programs look like. Because when a person's thinking about it, may be quite confused or unsure what's available, but going to Next Steps is a great spot to just kind of explore and take a few minutes to look through what some coursework might look like and what happens out the other end. And again, as we talked about before, this kind of support around the information, admissions counselors, financial aid counselors, et cetera. Those will really help students get a feel for what's possible and have those doubts kind of answered. And again, once the student enrolls, then there's support as a student, whether it's that tutoring we talked about, or this office in most schools called the Dean of Students that supports kind of the non-academic side of student life and what that's like. So what I want to do is look briefly at the landing page that we have for the Idaho Learning Partnership grant, all of you, and look at some specific resources that has been set up by Boise State to help address these. Okay, where do I go for financial aid? What are some other supports for managing a student life? I'm just going to switch sharing to the web browser with that landing page on it, and you're familiar with it. We kind of point you to it to see the updates from our community, and the posts that we make, the links to the past recordings, and this is where we'll add the link to the slide deck and the recording of our conversation just now. What I want to highlight is this resources block. Hopefully you all can see that. That has some of the key things that we looked at last time: Next Steps, Future Finder, and that Jobscape. The fifth bullet there is a page of resources that I hope you've seen before, because it includes the logos and the social media work that Boise State put together during the pilot phase of this project. And on that page is a long list of links. I encourage you to browse through it. And this is a quick way to get to this section right here. Is all the colleges and universities to their main landing pages, and some with veteran service centers highlighted. This next block about statewide, again, a link to next steps and Jobscape, et cetera. The kind of down here in the middle of the screen right now is the Idaho Opportunity Scholarship, and the one for adult learners that talks about that program and eligibility. And then national financial aid topics related to the federal and national opportunities that might be available for different students. And some articles at the bottom reading about education and just some food for thought. Might be good conversation starters. The tab I want to show you is this last one, Boise State resources. And because Boise State was the instigator with the Department of Education on this pilot project, they put together Boise State specific resources for potential and current students. And the invitation is out and will be out to other universities as well as colleges to add their own listing to this, so it's specific to a certain school. What this does is give you an idea of the supports at Boise State University for adult learners in the rural context. And quite honestly, every time I'm with Boise State administrators and leaders, they say the following: yes, we come with the Boise State logo on our polo, but I will talk to you about any college. I will point you to a college that's going to be best for you. So you can come talk to me about Boise State, and I'll tell you all about Boise State. If there's not a good fit, then I will direct you to the right person at University of Idaho or the College of Western Idaho. So even if a student in your area says, I can't go to Boise State, or I'm not really interested in taking online classes through Boise State, but maybe College of Eastern Idaho, then even talking to somebody at Boise State will open up the mind a little bit about possibilities. So again, we've talked about admissions. Someone can call the admissions office and just get plugged into a counselor right away. The registrar, how do I enroll to be a student once that step is in place, or the financial aid office and other university wide resources for adult learners, and then a section for veterans specifically, and the names of people to call with the phone number, and hopefully that will be a supportive idea for potential students. So I'd encourage you to glance through those resources as you kind of continue to talk to folks as they come into your library or on the phone if it's virtual to help direct. So that's the formal content. There's a couple more scenarios in the slide deck. So when you download that later, that might be helpful to kind of work through those scenarios. There's two more. Perspective of a veteran is one of them, and different ideas of how to navigate and provide resources for that veteran. What other questions you have, or concerns, or you thought of more barriers, or even the solutions? Well, what are some solutions to those barriers as you've been chewing on this for the last half hour or so? One thing I will say is it'd be great if there are new scenarios there are different barriers that come to mind, that as a peer group, all the libraries that are part of this project can learn from each other to have that barrier in mind before it then approaches someone who's never seen it before and a potential solution already. There's kind of peer learning, peer sharing as the weeks and months progress. That'd be great to kind of just give feedback on working with potential adult learners in your communities.